Sometimes life can be cruel enough to abandon a baby on the street. But what if that baby becomes the hope in a broken man's life? This miracle, created by Charlie Chaplin in 1921, wasn't just a film. It was the purest form of love, blooming in the midst of poverty. The kid reminds us that the only thing money cannot buy is genuine love. As Chaplin's first feature-length film, this masterpiece entered cinema history as one of those rare works that makes you cry while laughing and gives hope while bringing tears. The film takes place in the poor neighborhoods of the 1920s. It's the story of a little tramp who makes his living breaking windows on the streets and an abandoned baby. The tramp character, portrayed by Charlie Chaplin, is a man trying to survive, doing small tricks to get by each day, but with a heart of gold. One day, the baby he finds on the street will completely change his life. That baby will grow up, and together they'll show that happiness is possible, even in the midst of poverty. But will life easily allow them this happiness? Our tramp character is one of the most touching figures Chaplin ever created. With his bowler hat, oversized shoes, tight jacket, and cane, this man, we all recognize, is actually the representative of everyone society has rejected. Physically small and slight, his walk comical, but there's a deep melancholy in his eyes. A man who hasn't expected much from life, perhaps never had the courage to expect anything. He makes his living breaking windows, together with his partner, the child. First, the child throws a stone and breaks the window. Then he comes and offers to repair it. A small con, perhaps, but for them it's the way to cope with hunger. Can you imagine being so desperate that breaking windows becomes your means of survival? Yet even in this desperation, there's a strange dignity to how they conduct their business. The kid character, portrayed by Jackie Coogan, is innocent, but equally cunning. 5 years old, but grown up with the lessons the streets have taught him. He sees the tramp as his father, would do anything for him. The bond between them is much stronger than blood ties, because what binds them together is the struggle for survival and the pure love they feel for each other. When you watch them together, you forget they're not actually father and son. The way the child looks at the tramp with such trust and admiration, and the way the tramp protects him with fierce devotion that would rival any biological parent. The story begins with a young and beautiful woman abandoning her baby. The woman, crushed under society's pressure, doesn't have the strength to care for her baby. She leaves the baby in a wealthy family's car, hoping perhaps they'll take good care of it. But fate plays different games. The car is stolen. The thieves throw the baby onto the street. Right at this moment, the tramp's life changes forever. While wandering the streets, he hears a baby's cry. Next to a garbage can, a tiny creature wrapped in a blanket. At first, he doesn't know what to do. He tries to give the baby to someone else, but no one will take it. Finally, he accepts his fate and takes the baby home. What we mean by home is a small, dilapidated room in an attic, broken windows, peeling plaster, but the tramp has created a warm nest inside. He doesn't know how to care for a baby at first. He makes an old teapot into a bottle, turns his chair into a cradle. Comic scenes, but the emotion underlying them is very deep. For the first time in his life, a man is thinking of someone other than himself. The transformation is remarkable. This lonely drifter, who probably never imagined himself as a father, suddenly discovers paternal instincts he never knew existed. 5 years pass. Now the baby has grown, become the tramp's little partner. They wake up together in the mornings. The tramp teaches the child how to wash his face, brush his teeth. They prepare the table together, simple but filling. Then they go out to work. The child throws stones, breaks windows. The tramp comes, offers to repair the window. A perfect partnership until the police catch them. But each time they find a way to escape. The choreography of their escapes is pure poetry in motion, a dance between law and desperation. When they return home in the evenings, they're tired but happy. The child falls asleep in the tramp's arms. These scenes show us how love can flourish, even within poverty. But then comes the day that changes everything. The child falls ill with a fever. The tramp is desperate. He has no money for a doctor, but he'll do anything to save his boy. He wraps him in all the blankets they have, puts cold compresses on his forehead. The fear in his eyes is palpable. For the first time, we see the tramp truly afraid, not of hunger or police, but of losing the only thing that matters to him. This illness brings unexpected visitors. The doctor, seeing the poverty, notifies the authorities. They decide the child must be taken to an orphanage for his own good. Can you imagine that moment? After 5 years of building a life together, strangers in uniforms come to tear your child away from you. The tramp fights like a wild animal. He won't let them take his boy. The child clings to him, screaming. The scene is heartbreaking. Even the toughest viewers find themselves wiping away tears. The authorities eventually succeed in taking the child. But the tramp doesn't give up. He chases the truck carrying his boy, performs impossible acrobatic feats, and finally manages to rescue him. They escape together, but now they're truly fugitives. Meanwhile, the child's birth mother has become a successful opera singer. The guilt of abandoning her baby has haunted her all these years. She does charity work, trying to atone for her sin. By a twist of fate, she discovers that the child she's been helping in the poor neighborhood is actually her own son. She searches for him desperately, even puts out a reward. The tramp, exhausted and defeated, has taken shelter in a flophouse with the child. But even there, they're not safe. The owner of the flophouse, seeing the reward notice, steals the child while they sleep and takes him to claim the money. The tramp wakes to find his boy gone. The despair on his face is indescribable. He searches everywhere, calls out, but there's no answer. Exhausted, he returns to the doorstep of their old home and falls asleep. And here, Chaplin gives us one of cinema's most beautiful dream sequences. The tramp dreams of heaven, but it's heaven as only the poor would imagine it. Everyone has wings made of cardboard and wire. The streets are clean, people are kind, and most importantly, he's reunited with his boy. They dance together, fly together, in this makeshift paradise. But even in heaven, evil intrudes. Demons appear. Jealousy and greed corrupt this perfect world. The tramp wakes from his dream to find a policeman shaking him. But this time, the policeman isn't there to arrest him. He's there to reunite him with the child. The birth mother has found them and wants them both. The final scene shows the tramp being brought to a mansion. He's nervous, uncertain. Will this rich woman take his boy away? But when the door opens, there's the child, running to his arms. The mother watches, understanding finally what real parenthood means. It's not about blood or money. It's about love and sacrifice. She invites the tramp inside, and for the first time in his life, he enters through the front door of a grand house, not as a servant or beggar, but as a father. The film's most powerful moments come from the smallest gestures, the way the tramp carefully removes the child's worn shoes at night, placing them neatly by the bed, how he shares his meager meal, always making sure the child gets the bigger portion, the child's hand reaching for the tramp's when they cross the street. These tiny moments of tenderness speak louder than any dialogue could. When the child performs a little dance to make the tramp laugh after a hard day, or when the tramp tells him bedtime stories, using shadow puppets on their cracked wall, we see family in its truest form. One of the most memorable scenes involves the child getting into a street fight with another boy. The tramp watches from the sideline, coaching him like a boxing trainer. When the other boy's brother, a huge bully, threatens to join the fight, the tramp must face him, David versus Goliath, but with Chaplin's comic genius. He ducks, weaves, uses his cane cleverly, and somehow manages to win. The child looks at him with such pride. In that moment, the tramp isn't just a small man in oversized shoes. He's a hero, a protector, a real father. The film also shows us the harsh realities of poverty without romanticizing them. When the tramp patches the child's pants, we see how many times they've been mended before. When they eat, it's always the same simple fare, bread and tea. The child's toys are things found on the street, repurposed with imagination. A discarded doll becomes a treasured companion. An old pot becomes a drum. Yet despite having so little, they share what they have. When an even poorer neighbor needs help, they give what they can spare. What makes this film timeless is how it captures universal truths about human nature. The wealthy characters aren't villains. They're simply blind to the reality of poverty. The authorities believe they're helping by taking the child to an orphanage, unable to see the love that exists in that shabby attic room. The birth mother's journey from abandonment to redemption shows that mistakes can be forgiven, but some consequences last forever. She gains fame and fortune, but loses 5 precious years with her son. Chaplin's genius lies in how he balances comedy and tragedy. Just when your heart is breaking, he makes you laugh. When you're laughing hardest, he slips in a moment of profound sadness. The scene where the tramp first tries to abandon the baby is hilarious. He keeps trying to leave it somewhere, but through ridiculous circumstances, the baby keeps coming back to him. Yet, underneath the comedy is a man struggling with a moral choice that will define his entire life. Should he take responsibility for this abandoned child, or protect himself from another mouth he cannot feed? The film speaks to anyone who has ever felt like an outsider. The tramp and the kid are both rejects, unwanted by society, but together they create their own world, their own family. They don't need society's approval or understanding. They have each other, and that's enough. When the authorities come to separate them, claiming it's for the child's own good, we see how often society's help can be more harmful than poverty itself. The orphanage might provide better food and cleaner clothes, but it cannot provide what the tramp gives: freely, unconditional love. The dinner scene, where they sit at their humble table, is particularly touching. The tramp serves the child with the formality of a fine restaurant, teaching him manners that seem absurd in their poverty. But this is important. He's not raising a street child. He's raising a gentleman. The child learns to say please and thank you, to share, to be kind. These lessons, taught in a drafty attic, are more valuable than anything money could buy. When the child is sick, we see the tramp's complete transformation. The comic figure disappears entirely, replaced by a desperate father. He pawns his cane, his most precious possession and tool of his trade, to buy medicine. He sits by the child's bedside all night, cooling his fever with wet cloths, whispering comfort. In these moments, Chaplin shows us that parenthood isn't about biology. It's about choosing to love someone more than yourself. The dream sequence deserves special attention. It's not just comic relief. It's a window into the tramp's soul. His heaven isn't grand or golden. It's just their neighborhood, but cleaner, kinder. Everyone has wings, but they're obviously homemade, imperfect. Even in paradise, the tramp imagines himself as he is, a little man in shabby clothes, but he's happy because the child is with him. When sin enters paradise and the dream becomes a nightmare, with neighbors turning against each other, it reflects his fear that even happiness is temporary for people like him. The reunion scene is masterfully done. When the policeman leads him to the mansion, the tramp assumes he's being arrested for something. His body language shows resignation. He's been kicked around by life so often that he expects nothing good. When he sees the massive door, he automatically goes toward the servant's entrance. But then the door opens, And there's his boy, safe and clean, and running toward him. The joy on both their faces could light up the darkest room. The child doesn't care about his new toys or fine clothes. He just wants his daddy. What's remarkable about the mother's character is her evolution. She starts as a desperate young woman, making an impossible choice. Through the years, she tries to atone through charity, but it's impersonal, distant. Only when she discovers her son does she understand that charity isn't about giving money, it's about giving love. When she sees the tramp with her son, she could easily use her wealth and position to take the child away. Instead, she recognizes something sacred in their bond. Her invitation for the tramp to enter her home isn't charity, it's acknowledgement that he is the child's true father. The film's social commentary remains relevant today. How often do we judge families that don't fit conventional molds? How often do authorities intervene in situations they don't fully understand, breaking apart families in the name of child welfare? The orphanage authorities in the film aren't evil. They genuinely believe they're helping, but their inability to see past poverty to the love underneath causes immense pain. They see dirty faces and patched clothes, not the laughter and joy that fills that tiny attic room. Consider the window-breaking scheme. Yes, it's dishonest, but in a society that offers no opportunities for men like the tramp, what choice does he have? He could beg, but he maintains his dignity through work, even if that work is somewhat fraudulent. He's teaching the child to survive in a harsh world while still maintaining some code of honor. They never steal food, never hurt anyone. Their crimes are against property, not people. And even then, they provide a service fixing what they break. The physical comedy in the film is extraordinary, but it always serves the story. When the tramp tries to teach the child to pray, the kid keeps peeking to copy his movements. It's funny, but it also shows how children learn the air through imitation of those they love. When they run from the policeman, their synchronized movements show how perfectly they understand each other. They don't need words. They move as one unit, protector and protected, but also partners in crime and in life. The film also explores masculinity in unexpected ways. The tramp must be both mother and father to the child. He cooks, cleans, mends, clothes, traditionally feminine tasks. Yet he also teaches the child to fight, protects him from bullies, shows him how to be strong. Chaplin presents a complete parent, not bound by gender roles. The tramp's masculinity isn't diminished by his tenderness. It's enhanced by it. Real strength, the film suggests, isn't in muscles or money, but in the courage to love and sacrifice. Music plays a crucial role in the film's emotional impact. Though silent, the film was always meant to be accompanied by music, and Chaplin himself composed the score for later releases. The music swells during emotional moments, becomes playful during comic scenes, and turns menacing when authorities threaten their happiness. It's like another character in the film, expressing what the actors cannot say. When the tramp rocks the baby to sleep, the lullaby in the score makes you feel the tenderness of the moment. The film's influence on cinema cannot be overstated. It proved that feature-length comedies could also be serious dramas. It showed that audiences would embrace stories about society's forgotten people. The combination of laughter and tears became Chaplin's signature, but The Kid was where he perfected the formula. Every film about unlikely families, about bonds that transcend blood, owes something to The Kid. It created a template that filmmakers still follow today. But beyond its technical achievements, the film's greatest triumph is its heart. In an era when poverty was often portrayed as either comic or pathetic, Chaplin showed it with dignity and truth. The poor and the kid aren't saints or sinners. They're people trying to survive and find happiness where they can. The rich aren't demons. They're just disconnected from the reality of struggle. The authorities aren't evil. They're misguided. Everyone is human, flawed, but capable of goodness. The ending isn't really an ending. It's a beginning. We don't know what happens next. Will the tramp adapt to life in a mansion? Will the mother accept him as an equal parent? Will the child remember his roots or be spoiled by wealth? Chaplin leaves these questions unanswered because life doesn't provide neat endings. But what matters is that love has triumphed. At least for now, a family has been preserved, even if it doesn't look like what society expects. For me, this film represents the essence of what family really means. It's not about sharing DNA or having a marriage certificate. It's about choosing to be there day after day, especially when times are hard. The tramp could have walked away when he found that baby. No one would have blamed him. He had nothing to offer but poverty. But he stayed, and in staying, he discovered that he had everything to offer: love, protection, guidance, and hope. The child gave him purpose, and he gave the child a father. Together, they gave each other a family. When I watch this film, I think about all the unconventional families in our world today. Single parents struggling to make ends meet, grandparents raising grandchildren, foster parents opening their homes to strangers' children, friends who become chosen family. The kid reminds us that these bonds, formed by choice rather than chance, can be just as strong as any biological connection, sometimes stronger, because they're tested by hardship and strengthened by conscious commitment. The film also makes me reflect on how we define success. The tramp is, by society's standards, a complete failure. He has no home, no steady job, no possessions of value. But he succeeds where it matters most, in loving and being loved. He raises a good child, kind and clever and brave. Isn't that worth more than any fortune? The birth mother has everything society says brings happiness: fame, wealth, beauty. But she's miserable until she finds her son and sees the love between him and his adopted father. Personal reflection and analysis. This film holds a mirror to our modern world. Today, we still struggle with the same questions. What makes a good parent? Is it resources or love? When should society intervene in family life? How do we balance child welfare with family preservation? The kid doesn't provide easy answers, but it makes us think. It makes us feel. And perhaps most importantly, it makes us question our assumptions about poverty, parenthood, and the nature of family itself. Have you ever wondered what defines a proper home for a child? Is it four walls and a roof, or is it the arms that hold them when they're scared? The authorities in the film would say the orphanage is better. It has clean beds, regular meals, proper education. But would you trade your parents' love for better material conditions? Most of us would say no. Yet we often support policies that separate poor families instead of supporting them to stay together. The genius of Chaplin was in making us see ourselves in both the tramp and the authorities. Haven't we all judged someone by their appearance? Haven't we assumed that poor parents must be bad parents? But haven't we also felt like outsiders, struggling to belong, fighting to protect what we love? The film works because it touches these universal experiences while telling a specific story about specific people in a specific time and place. The kid also raises questions about charity and justice. The mother character does charity work, helping poor children, but charity maintains the system that creates poverty. Justice would mean changing that system so charity becomes unnecessary. The film doesn't explicitly make this political argument, but it's there in the subtext. Why should children depend on the random kindness of wealthy strangers? Why should the tramp have to break windows to feed a child? These questions resonate even more strongly today. What strikes me most is the film's relevance to contemporary discussions about wealth inequality. The gap between the mansion and the attic is vast, but it's not portrayed as natural or acceptable. It's shown as a tragedy that separates mother from child, that forces good people into minor crimes, that makes authorities suspicious of love that exists without money. The film doesn't offer revolution as a solution, but it definitely problematizes the status quo. Think about this. What would you have done in the tramp's position? Found a baby on the street, no one to take it. You can barely feed yourself. Would you keep it? Most of us want to say yes. But would we really? And if we did, could we love that child as completely as the tramp does? Could we sacrifice our few pleasures, risk arrest, fight authorities, all for a child that isn't even ours? These questions challenge us to examine our own capacity for unconditional love. The film's impact on popular culture extends far beyond cinema. The image of Chaplin's tramp with little Jackie Coogan became iconic, representing the triumph of love over adversity. It influenced how we see single fathers, adopted families, and the poor. It humanized people who were often invisible in popular media. After The Kid, it became harder to dismiss the poor as simply lazy or immoral. Chaplin forced audiences to see their full humanity. From a technical standpoint, the film revolutionized visual storytelling. Without dialogue, Chaplin had to convey complex emotions through body language, facial expressions, and visual metaphors. The scene where the tramp prepares breakfast becomes a ballet of poverty, every movement calculated to show both lack and love. When he cuts the bread, we see him measure carefully, ensuring the child gets enough. These details, which might be lost in a talking picture, become poetry in silence. The film also pioneered the use of children in serious dramatic roles. Jackie Coogan wasn't just a cute prop. He was a full actor, required to convey complex emotions. His performance inspired generations of child actors. The natural chemistry between him and Chaplin couldn't be faked. They genuinely loved each other, and it shows in every frame. When Coogan grew up, he said working with Chaplin was the happiest time of his life. But perhaps the most lasting impact of The Kid is how it changed our understanding of comedy. Before this film, feature-length comedies were usually just extended sketches, full of gags, but lacking emotional depth. Chaplin proved that comedy could carry serious themes, that laughter and tears aren't opposites, but companions. Every dramedy we see today, every film that makes us laugh and cry, owes a debt to The Kid. As we sit here, over a century later, what can The Kid teach us? First, that love doesn't require perfection. The tramp is far from a perfect parent, but his love is perfect in its completeness. Second, that family is about choice as much as chance. We can choose to love, choose to sacrifice, choose to fight for each other. Third, that dignity exists in all circumstances. The tramp maintains his dignity even in poverty, teaching the child to do the same. The film also reminds us to question authority, especially when it claims to act in our best interests. The authorities taking the child represent every well-meaning intervention that destroys more than it helps. How often do we support policies or actions that hurt the very people they're supposed to help? How often do we assume we know what's best for others without truly understanding their situations? In our current era of helicopter parenting and child safety obsession, The Kid offers a different perspective. The child in the film faces real dangers, poverty, illness, police pursuit, but he also experiences freedom, adventure, and deep love. He learns resilience, creativity, and loyalty. Would he be better off in a safe, sterile orphanage? The film suggests that some risks are worth taking, that over safety can be its own form of harm. What would happen if we remade The Kid today? Could we capture the same magic? Or has our world become too cynical? Would modern audiences accept the sentimentality? Or would they demand more edge, more darkness? I think the story still works because its core truth remains relevant. Love transcends circumstances, but I wonder if we've lost some capacity to believe in pure goodness in sacrifice without reward, in love without conditions. The film challenges us to see beyond surfaces. When we pass homeless people on the street, do we see potential parents, lovers, heroes, or do we see problems to be solved or avoided? The Tramp reminds us that everyone has a story, everyone has capacity for love, everyone deserves dignity. These aren't radical ideas, but they're radically ignored in how we structure society. If Charlie Chaplin could see our world today, what would he think? We have more wealth than ever, yet children still go hungry. We have advanced child psychology, yet families are still torn apart by poverty. We celebrate diverse families in theory, yet judge them in practice. The kid's message remains urgent. Love matters more than money, choice more than blood, dignity more than charity. Closing thoughts. So I leave you with these questions. What makes a real parent? DNA or dedication? Can love truly conquer poverty? Or is that just a comforting myth? How do we balance protecting children with preserving families? And perhaps most importantly, who are the kids and tramps in our own lives that we're failing to see? This film isn't just a piece of cinema history. It's a living document about human resilience and the power of chosen family. Every time we watch it, we're reminded that the greatest gifts aren't wrapped in fancy paper. They're wrapped in love, sacrifice, and the courage to care for someone else more than ourselves. The next time you see an unconventional family, remember the tramp and the kid. Remember that love doesn't always look like we expect. Sometimes, it looks like a shabby man in oversized shoes, teaching a small boy to survive in a harsh world while never letting him forget he is loved. That's the real miracle of the kid, not that a poor man raises a child, but that in raising that child, both of them discover what it means to be truly rich. Classic films like The Kid aren't just windows into the past. They're mirrors of our eternal human condition. They remind us that while technology changes, fashions change, and societies change, the human heart remains constant in its need for love, belonging, and purpose. Chaplin knew this, and he gave us a film that speaks to these needs across all boundaries of time, language, and culture. What stays with you after watching The Kid? Is it the laughter, the tears, or that perfect blend of both? For me, it's the image of two figures walking hand in hand into an uncertain future, rich in nothing but each other. That's worth more than all the mansions in the world.